So we just had this horrible school shooting in Parkland, Florida. Everyone's talking about it, understandably. 17 people killed tragically, most of them young people. And what can you really say? Words are insufficient. So I don't have too much to say about it. But one thing that you do hear being said, unfortunately, and this is predictable because it happens now in the wake of every incident like this, is you see the Democrats calling for more gun control. In fact, just yesterday, Barack Obama tweeted that this was a good opportunity to talk about implementing common sense gun control laws. Now, here's what's funny about that. Mr. Obama, you and your Democrat comrades controlled both the legislative and executive branches of government the first 2 years you were in office until early 2011. And that means you could have passed any gun control laws you wanted, common sense or otherwise, but you didn't do it. You chickened out. You didn't step up to the plate. And you know why? Because you were worried about incurring the wrath of the voter at election time for having pushed unpopular policy. So let's translate what the Democrats are saying. They're saying we didn't have the guts to pass our agenda, which ostensibly we believe in when we were in power. But now that we're out of power and you, the opposition, are in power, we want you to pass our agenda. That's not how it works. Get serious. You had your chance. You chickened out. That's over with. Don't complain now. But let's talk about gun control because unfortunately we have these shootings now periodically. They've become an unfortunate fact of American life and they beg for an answer. A lot of people say, well, we want a solution. What can we do? And then there are people who say, well, gun control is the answer. We need fewer guns around. Well, the real answer is this. You can look anywhere you want in the world, and this is the truth. There is no correlation whatsoever between gun control laws and murder rates. For instance, there are countries with stricter gun control laws than the US, but higher murder rates, such as Russia, Brazil, and Mexico. There are countries that have very high rates of gun ownership, but very low murder rates, such as Israel and Switzerland. And then what about us, the United States? Well, we're supposed to be a wild west of murder and mayhem, right? That's what you hear in the news, or that's the impression you get. But the last time I checked, which was not that long ago, in terms of intentional homicide, we ranked only 98th or 99th on a list of about 194 countries. So we're not really doing that badly. But we can break it down further. A lot of people, such as Piers Morgan, the British journalist, for instance, love to cite the United Kingdom as an example of a country with very low murder rates, but also very strict gun control. They'll say, well, look at that UK. They have stricter gun control laws than we do, and that's why their murder rate is so much lower. But guess what? You take states such as New Hampshire, well, they have a much higher gun ownership rate than the UK, but also slightly lower murder rates. Yes, that's true. There are other things you can point to. People in rural areas per capita own guns, more of them, than people in urban areas, but people in rural areas have a lower murder rate. Whites own more guns than blacks, but whites have a lower murder rate. And then how about this one? How does this grab you? Japan has one of the lowest murder rates in the world. Nonetheless, and this is a somewhat old statistic, but I believe it still applies, Japanese living in the US with our relatively loose gun control laws have a murder rate that's half of that of Japanese living in Japan. How do you explain that? Well, it's very, very simple. All of this is explainable by way of the fact that, as Thomas Sowell, the economics professor, once said, it's not the guns, it's the people. Anywhere in the world, the greatest predictor of murder rates is not the level of gun ownership, it's not the number of gun control laws, it's demographics. Now, the last thing we need to do to gain perspective is understand that the evil done with guns we can see very easily. For instance, if there's a shooting like in Parkland, it's a terrible thing, and the media cover it 24/7 justifiably, so everyone knows about it. But what we don't see is the good done with guns. And here I want to use a spin on a line from the famed French economist Frederick Bastiat. And I'll say, a bad social analyst observes only what can be seen. A good social analyst observes what can be seen and what is unseen and what must be foreseen. Now, again, what we see very easily are those mass shootings, the terrible crimes done with guns. What we don't see are all the times that good citizens use firearms each and every day in these United States to defend against criminals, to ward off crimes. How often do they do it? Well, according to Florida State criminologist Gary Kleck, a lifelong Democrat and card-carrying member of the ACLU, good citizens use guns to ward off crime 2.2 to 2.5 million times every single year. That's a lot more than the number of people who are killed with guns. In fact, it's not even close. Now, of course, that doesn't mean that those 2.2 to 2.5 million people all would have died otherwise. The point is that good is done with guns all the time. As the saying goes, the best place to find a helping hand is at the end of your arm. And sometimes that hand can't do what it needs to do unless it's wielding a gun.